Hi, I'm Professor Sky. Welcome to the eighth recorded lecture from my class FCE 207, Haiti, the most important country in the world. We're going to be getting a little bit deeper into the revolution. We're going to talk about a point where the revolution almost came to an end, the revolution of the enslaved people. We're going to talk about colonies and empires and what it takes to be a revolutionary leader. As always, I want to start off this video by just briefly saying that YouTube learning is passive learning. So if you really want to learn, take notes. Please, follow along. I'll give you the sources I'm consulting. I suggest you find those, and if you can, take a class sometime, where you actually get assessed. This is a class for 200 level students, so I am trying to make it not too deep into the woods. We'll see how well I do with that. And I am not an expert on Haitian history or culture, so if you have any corrections for me, I am more than open to it. I'm just somebody who thinks it's really important that more of the world knows more of this story, which, as I said, I think is the most important story you can know. So let's get to this class. One more reminder, some of the words I'm using are a little bit archaic and might be offensive in 2025. Words like black, white, colored. I might say slaves from time to time instead of enslaved people. Please forgive me, language changes and evolves, and sources do not. Sources might stay the same. Speaking of sources, this is primarily, I took two episodes of the Revolutions podcast, the sixth and seventh, and I've kind of congealed them into one class with a lot of help from C.L.R. James and the Black Jacobins for a little bit more of the spiritual side of this essay. So, the revolution stalls. Students and friends, I am Professor Sky. My name is perhaps known to you. I have undertaken to teach about Haiti. I want curiosity and a thirst for complex understanding to reign in this class. I am working to help that happen. Unite yourselves, students, and learn with me for the same cause. This is what I show my students. This is the title of the class, and they all have to take notes in order to get a good grade. I'm also going to be a little bit cute with my class and just say this is a class of too many threes. There are so many groups of threes that are going to be popping up. I'm going to be trying to keep them awake by having them kind of say hooty hoo every time there's a three. I don't know, say three, three. You can do it back home. We're going to do a review of Bois Quémont, a review of what the commissioners discovered, the deals that were proposed, a brief introduction to Toussaint Louverture, riots, revolts in Raymond, and the empire's strike back. So the first thing I'm going to do, and I invite you to do this as well. If you post this on Instagram and you tag me at Professor Sky, I'll like it. I'll take a little look. I'm going to have my students draw the events of the Bois Quémont. The reason I'm doing this is I want them to understand that this is a foundational event that is also a foundational myth. So I want them to be able to produce the different elements on a separate piece of paper, explain the elements in the drawing, including the people there and what they were. So we're going to have the leader, Dati Boukman. We're going to have the priestess. We're going to have the pig. We're going to have the rain. We're going to have the woods. All these things that are part of this foundational myth. Please watch my last episode my last class if you're not familiar with what this is. Now, where I left it off in my class is here. I didn't get to this, so I'm just going to skip right through this um, because I already talked about this. So my YouTube video went just right, but my class went too long. So I'll just briefly say what I'm going to say to them, that while there was a slave uprising, the whites and the coloreds were fighting against each other. The coloreds enlisted the help of the enslaved people. They called them the Swiss. There was eventually an agreement. The agreement was that they're no longer coming to bargain. The whites completely flew the white flag, no pun intended, and all citizens had equal rights. And this is part of the great frustration. We're going to be seeing this all the way throughout today. So I just got a haircut. I'm not sure I like what's happening over here. Got kind of an emperor penguin thing going on over there. It's all right. Um, this constant back and forth with what France says, what different factions in Haiti say, when they go back, when they agree, when they're revolting, it's all very confusing, as I hope you can as I hope you're able to tell already so far in this class. And the Swiss? These enslaved people who were promised their freedom by the coloreds, once there was an agreement between the whites and the coloreds, they were just now an inconvenient thing to remember. So this is a thing where I'm going to ask my students to tell me, and hopefully they'll answer, but I'll put up the answer on the screen just so you know. They tried to sell them. No one wanted to buy them. They shipped them to Jamaica. The Brits found them, shipped them back to Saint-Domingue. They were killed, and then the rest of them were starved to death on a boat. There's going to be a lot of dying on boats in today's class. So, is this the end of the Civil War? That's the question I'm going to be asking my students. Hopefully, they know when I ask a question like this, the answer is going to be no. The whites and the coloreds are going to continue fighting, despite the fact there is an ongoing slave revolution happening, which they are directly involved in. They are going to keep fighting with each other, trying to figure out who has more power in this land, who has the rights, which is made more complicated by the fact that back in the hexagon, back in the parts of France that are in Europe, the thing that you think of when you say France, over there, the May 15th decree, the decree that was so important to this idea of equality, the thing that the coloreds were fighting for. This guy, Barnave, he convinces them to overturn it. They need the money from the slave trade, and you need to respect colonial autonomy. And if you don't remember, it takes 2 months to get from France to Saint-Domingue, 2 months across the ocean. So things constantly happen while people are in the ocean going to go tell something different to Saint-Domingue. So they send somebody. So at this point, where are we? Where are we in November 1791? In France, there's consistent political chaos and constant upheaval. Different factions take power and take power over. It is still a constitutional monarchy. This is important. I don't think I made this clear enough to my students. There is still a king. Louis the 16th is still a king, but there is a national assembly to which he has to consider. It is a hybrid of a monarchy and a republic, which, as you know, will be ending very soon. So it's just a huge mess. And the fact that France just cannot get its stuff together is going to have a huge impact on Saint-Domingue. In North Saint-Domingue, we have the slave uprising. In the South Saint-Domingue, we have in and out of civil war between the whites and the coloreds. It's just a mess. Three upheavals. Three, three, three. And this is when the first commission comes by. The commission just means people sent by France to tell the colonists what to do. We've got your orders, everybody. Everybody gather round, and I will tell you what some people thousands of miles away want you to do. So they arrive in November 1791. Hey guys, what's up? What's up is that Le Cap, where they arrive, is almost like it's a fortified city at this point. I mean, it's very fortified. It's being protected. There's huge slave revolts. There's civil wars going on. They're supposed to show up to say, just kidding, coloreds don't have the same rights as whites, but they have to just think on their feet. They are showing up in the middle of a. One time, I had to go get something from my attic, and I was like this close to putting my hand straight through a hornet's nest. This is like if they actually put their hand entirely through a hornet's nest. That's what they came to. But while they arrived there, the slave revolt actually stalled. And this is something which I want to take a second and go off my screen share thing just to pontificate about. We often think of revolutions as being these non-stop kinetic machines, just wave after wave after wave after wave. That's just a historical convenience. We're going to be seeing how the point between the first time an enslaved person rises up against his masters in a violent, coordinated manner, and the time when they are actually free is years. It's not a question of weeks, it's a question of years. So why is that? Why are things stalled? Well, CLR James has a good point about this. If you don't remember, Jeannot, who was the third leader, was killed by them. Someone mentioned in a comment that I shouldn't call him torturing people to death bloodthirsty because it comes across as maybe sort of like imperialist, and that I wouldn't say that about Hitler. I appreciate the sentiment of the criticism. I would say that about Hitler, though. I think anybody who tortures anybody is bloodthirsty. I don't that there's no equivalence, right? I should know is in no way equivalent, but like, anyways, that is an interesting point. I'm not saying that person is wrong. I'm thinking about it, whether or not what I was saying was off. But anyways, Jeannot was ruthless at the very least, and did torture his people who he captured, and he did apparently take delight in that. And Biassou and Jean-Francois both saw him as a competitor and as somebody who would make negotiations impossible, because as we are learning today, their goal is negotiations. The goal of this early point of the revolution is not an independent country. It is like a country in which they are no longer enslaved and they can work with France and maintain this great economy. So by late 1791, Biassou and Jean-Francois and the other Negro leaders, including Toussaint, after 4 months of insurrection, had come to a dead end. An insurrection must win victories, and the whites were content to hold the line of fortifications known as the Cordon of the West and prevent the insurrection penetrating into the West Province. The former slaves could devastate the country around, but that very devastation was making it impossible for them to exist. Famine began to kill them off. So here's an image. Here's an image of that first commission arriving. Now, I don't think it really went like this, but this is an image of how they were greeted by the leaders of the slave revolution. Like, things were stalled. They didn't know what to do. Even though they could outnumber the whites, they couldn't out coordinate them because the numbers were all over the country. And how do you get them coordinated? And they don't have enough weapons, and they're going up against a heavily trained professional army. So Jean-Francois and Biassou they make a deal. Well, or they try to make a deal. They fail to make a deal. So I'll just take a second here, okay? So what would you ask for if you were a leader of a slave revolt? What would you insist on? What would you say? This is what I need. This is what we need. This is what my people need. Okay? So now that you have that in mind, get ready for what they ask for. Amnesty. Okay. That means all good. No harm, no foul. We might have killed some people. We might have had some wars. All set. No harm, no foul. Freedom for everybody? No. Freedom for the leaders. Not the masses, but for the leaders. Presumably, these leaders would be freed, would be able to start their own sugar plantations, for example. This is why I insist history is complex. There are not really good guys and bad guys. Everybody is really trying to figure out what works for them. I mean, there are some ideologically forward people, but not all of them. So they're looking for amnesty, freedom from leaders. They want to be able to keep all the stuff that they took while they were revolutioning, while they were taking things over. And this would have resulted in, I've seen different numbers, around 60 freed slaves of the 500,000. So let's imagine that you are the royal governor of Blancheland. Let's imagine that you are Big White X, the person who used to have a plantation. Do you take that deal? I believe I quote Carl Naughton Jr. when talking to Ricky Bobby. Not for nothing, Ricky, but he did offer you a pretty good out. That's a pretty good deal. That's a pretty good deal. Especially seeing where it's going. That's a pretty good deal. But pride, I don't know what, they said no. That's not acceptable. They, I guess, wanted to keep on fighting. They thought they could get a better deal. They didn't like the amnesty. They didn't like the message it would send that you can revolt. I guess they thought that it would keep going or that it would encourage it to happen again. It's at this point where we are briefly introduced to Toussaint Louverture, probably the most important figure in the first half of this class. So I'm just going to throw this out there for you. I'm just going to throw these bullet points out, but we're coming back. We are coming back. Born enslaved, Creole, so he was born on the island. He apparently had a kind master. He apparently read Reynal, the person who said, if you remember from a couple classes ago, where is the great leader? Only a great leader is needed. He was a coachman, a livestock manager. He would be known as Papa Toussaint. He bought his own freedom. He owned between, depending on what sources you read, up to 12 enslaved people or just one. I don't say that to knock him down. I don't think that makes him a bad figure in history. I think it makes it a very complicated time where the ability to make a living, the ability to make a good living, the ability to maintain your freedom might even be contingent on participating in something which you will ultimately come to help to destroy. And his early history is just written and rewritten, a huge figure of history. So we're just going to mention here, okay, he's like the lieutenant of Jean-Francois, but he's going to be the most important person. What was the truth? It doesn't really matter. The myth and the truth are so mixed together that it's all the truth. So, the Civil War keeps going. The Civil War keeps going in the South. The Civil War keeps going because after the Concordat happens, the small whites, not this small white X was killed in the last class, but he represents the small whites, which is to say the people who came over from France and didn't own a lot of land and weren't rich and weren't powerful. What did they think of this Concordat? They think it's a crock. They don't like it. They want their power back. So it was going to be ratified. It's going to be voted on by the people around Port-au-Prince. Before it happened, they started a race riot. They robbed the big whites. They would lynch anybody they could. They burned it down. Uh, they won a battle against the colored forces in Jérémie, which is up here. Where's my map? Jérémie, it's up there. So I just dropped the mic on my belt. I apologize for that. So they put them on a boat that had smallpox and let them die in the harbor. This is the world that we're living in. This is the bloodthirsty actions I am describing. One of the quotes I'm going to have my students explain is something that Mike Duncan says. Pretty soon, the clashes between whites and coloreds became a battle between slave and slave. So, what does that mean? What that means is both the whites and the coloreds would employ enslaved people and have them fight on their behalf. Like promise them freedom. Promise them freedom. If my side wins, you're free. So go fight for your freedom. You just, this is why this class is so important because that's sort of what most of war has been for as long as war has existed. It's been people who have everything to lose and everything to gain, employing, using the lives of people who have very little to lose and just using their lives, just using them like fuel on a fire. Just you go there, we need more fuel, get more. The whole story's here. So that's what that means. Now, I want to take a second here because I was rereading CLR James, and I was fascinated by something he said that I didn't know if I really agreed with. So I want to have a little brief aside here on the nature of revolutionary leaders. The first revolutionary leader we were introduced to was Macandal. You might remember him from a few classes ago. This is well before the time that we're talking about right now, but he tried to lead a slave uprising, tried to poison everybody, but he was captured, burned alive, and apparently transformed into a fly. Hmm. I'm going to ask my students, did he really transform into a fly? And then when I ask them in the little Bois-Quémont drawing that they did, what's the name of the man? Dear God, I hope they remember that his name is Dutty Boukman. Okay. What was his name? And I'm going to ask them a question. Was he a spiritual leader or a political leader, and I'm going to let them discuss. And while they're discussing, this is what I want them to say. Well, yes, he was both. He was a political leader. He was pretty well educated. He led a pretty interesting life. He was charismatic. He knew how to talk to people. He knew how to organize. He knew how to coordinate. He had vision. He was not just some mystical leader, but also he knew how to use voodoo. Apparently, he was a Hungan, a voodoo priest of some sort. Apparently, allegedly, at least according to the myth, he is like half spiritual, half political. And that's a pattern that's going to keep on going. The bit that I want to read from C.L.R. James that I'm a little bit ambiguous about is how he talks about the slaves in the west of Haiti as being backwards, maybe not as sophisticated as those who live closer to the capital. We can judge the backwardness of the Western slaves at the beginning of the revolution for the fact that both Hyacinth, who was a slave leader who like carried around an oxtail and said like, I can't be killed because I have an oxtail and I will protect you with the gods, right? And another man, Romain the prophetess, we're going to be talking about right there, fortified their authority with divine attributes, while Jean-Francois and Biassou in the north, from the very beginning, aimed at a social revolution. I don't have answers for this. I just want to throw that out there. I just want to throw out this question, this dichotomy that James is pointing out and that appears to be pretty clear here. Like, do you need to be like a messianic figure, a semi-spiritual figure to lead a revolution? Does there have to be something magical about you? And if there does that just prove that human beings are not capable of like meaningful revolution without something supernatural guiding them or protecting them? I don't know. I don't have answers, but I'm telling you that's a question that the Haitian Revolution asks of us. Do you have to be supernatural to be a leader of a revolution? So I'm going to have my students turn over the paper and do a drawing of this. Help me draw Romaine la prophétesse. He said he was the Virgin Mary reincarnated, 10,000 strong army. He had the help of armed coloreds. He occupied the city of Léogane for months, November 1791 to March 1792. There you see it there, kind of up there, kind of near Port-au-Prince. But there's no pictures of him. We don't know what he looks like, but we know that he called himself the prophetess, meaning he called himself a woman. That was how like he would preach, and he had this amazing power over his people. And so the drawing that I want them to do for me is Roman on a horse with a magical rooster on the saddle with a saber in hand, again dressed like the Virgin Mary, under an inverted cross. Do you feel that power? Do you feel the imagery and the mysticism that he's using here? So I'm not going to go into great detail into him or Hyacinth, just to say that there's multiple different kinds of leaders in different parts of the country. And everything's so divided because it's so hard to get across the country, and the means of moving across the country that's available to enslaved blacks is not very great. That all these things can happen all at once. Speaking of things happening at once, we're now in April 1792. And the whole thing about the about what was originally announced in May 15th is now going to be a royal decree. And this is pushed with the help of Raymond, who we've been studying for in the class for the last couple of days. We're now going to have signed by Louis XVI, who is still king, yet to be deposed, yet to be decapitated. Jacobin, that's just another word for a kind of French revolutionary. Louis XVI signed it, meaning it's a royal decree. It's not an act, it's a decree. There is no distinction between coloreds, free blacks, and whites. So there was the first commission who was there to say there is distinction between blacks and whites, and then the second commission is sent to say, just kidding, no, there's not. Do you see how the upheaval in France has this impact on Saint-Domingue? Things are just going all over the place. So Brissot sends the second commission. Brissot is maybe one of the more likable characters in this class. a founder of the Society of Friends of Blacks, an abolitionist and a revolutionary. And he manages to have some power in the National Assembly, and he handpicks the three commissioners who are going to go. And this is the second commission. We have Paul Verel, we have Sotonax, we don't have Raymond. He wanted Raymond, but ultimately they decided that was too provocative, that it was not useful, that it was going to create more problems than it was, so they picked someone else. Three, three, three. We have yet another group of threes. I'm just going to call this person face do chicken. He doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He's going to leave like right away. Plus 6,000 troops, 6,000 highly trained French troops sent. Now, what are they there for? We're going to talk about what they're there for. But 6,000 highly trained French troops, this is really important because at the same time that France is in the middle, is beginning a series of wars with everyone else in Europe because no one wants the democracy to spread. They need all the people they can get, and they're sparing 6,000. And so 6,000 of them are going to go to Saint-Domingue to fight for whatever it is that the crown wants, because it's still a crown. It's still a constitutional monarchy right now. Did I say 6,000? No, 3,000 of them just died. We're going to see. The greatest hero, the greatest hero of the Haitian Revolution is a mosquito. We're going to get there soon enough. Okay, let's get back to the slideshow here. Do I do too many asides here? Oh, yes. His name was Iho. I-O. He was called by CLR James a non-entity. Damn. So I like person face do chicken. So it's the second commission with three commissioners, three, three, three. And they say, hey, what's up, everybody? What's up? How we doing? Everything going okay? Are we ready? Are we ready to like tell everybody that actually we were kidding last time and it is good this time? They come with three aims. One, and the all-white assembly. As a reminder, if you're getting confused because the words committee, commission, assembly, national committee, all these words get mixed up. There is a colonial assembly that is in charge of determining what is best for the colony of Saint-Domingue. They still have to answer to France, but they do have some autonomy that they won throughout the French Revolution and through the Club Massiac and trying to get the French to give them some respect. So this National Assembly, this colonial assembly does have some power, and it has been very, very intentionally all white. After the Concordat, it seemed like maybe it'd be mixed, but here it's making sure, according to the king, who they answer to. They all answer Louis the 16th. Long live Louis the 16th. It is going to be mixed race government, whites and coloreds. Not enslaved people, but whites and coloreds. And part number two, we're done with independence. The sugar must flow, and it must flow to France. You're not going to figure out who you're going to align with. You're not going to be independent. You are going to be with us. And then we need to end this slave uprising because it's really having a tough time having the sugar flow. It's really tough. And Sultan said, don't worry, we're not going to free the slaves. We definitely would never, ever try to do that. We're going to see he's going to do that next class. Meanwhile, wait, these guys just got here. These guys just got here. And within a couple weeks after them leaving, things change all over again in France, in the Hexagon, in the part of France that is in Europe, all over again. There's the insurrection of August 10th, which I'm not going to get into. It's a fascinating moment in world history. I will just cut to the point where they say, we're done. No longer a constitutional monarchy. We're going to be a republic. This is the end of the French monarchy. They have not yet cut off his head. That will be soon, within a year-ish. But there is no more monarchy. So that news has to show up. Then we're back up north. Okay. So we're back up north. This news arrives. Jean-Francois calls himself Grand Admiral. Biassou calls himself Governor General. This is going to be a pretty consistent theme. There's a kind of thing where these uh, ex-enslaved people and children of ex-enslaved people, people who are very literally disenfranchised in every possible way, when they have some power, they might take on some amount of trappings of power once they get it, like dress or titles. For centuries, that's been a source of kind of white supremacists laughing, like, look, they think they're human, which is what's underneath it. And we're going to get to a lot of, get further on. We're going to emperors and stuff like that. This class there's emperors in this class. Haitian emperors are coming in this class. So I'm not making fun of them. I'm not making fun of them for taking these titles because like that's what they think power looks like. So they're going to give themselves these titles, such as Grand Admiral Jean-Francois and Governor General Biassou. So they make a new demand. They're like, you know what? General liberty, amnesty, and the king has to acknowledge it. Okay, we'll stop this whole thing. This can all go away, but the king has to acknowledge it. So Sontonax and Rochambeau, more about him later, show up and they hear that. And Sontonax says, oh, I see. Oh, yeah, you want the king to sign it. Yeah, we don't have a king anymore. So, yeah, no, it doesn't. We're not going to accept your request because we don't do that anymore. Like any of this matters to the enslaved people, whether or not France is a kingdom or a monarchy. It doesn't matter. They just want to be not whipped to death in the sun for nothing. And Rochambeau is going to go have some military success against the enslaved people, but the nature of this success is interesting. It's not much. So what they would do is they would, find a plantation where the formerly enslaved people would be living. They'd, plant gardens. They knew how to how to live, right? Obviously, because they've been living on less than nothing for their entire life. Would go and push them around and kick them out, all that. And then once they left, the army would leave, and all the formerly enslaved people would just go right back where they were like sandcastles, You can't, like, they can just go right back. So these victories are very temporary and not very meaningful. Sorry, is my computer kind of laggy? It seems kind of, oh, I have too many things open. Oh God, I got a lot of things open. One second. I'm gonna quit out of, can I quit out of this? I'm gonna quit out of that. And then I'll definitely quit out of that. I don't need Firefox open. I don't need my messages open. This is better. I don't need that open. Some real teacher style stumbling around here. Man, I have way too many things open. Oh, I definitely don't need Acrobat. Whew, okay, this should be better. Oh, wait, am I still sharing? No, I'm not sharing. Okay. Wow, man, that was some old man energy right there. So this leaves the enslaved people just to say, like, fine, I guess we're royalists. I mean, they can't keep up with all this. Who are they going to side with? They don't care. So they just kind of say, fine, we're royalists, which then puts them against Sontonax and the second commission. Then he shows up to Le Cap and says, you have to swear loyalty to the Republic by swearing loyalty to the law of April 4th. Totally mixed assembly, no prejudice against coloreds, and also no talk of breaking free, and they don't swear to it. So they're like, oh yeah, right. That law that you're here to enforce, that was signed by the king. You see, they were trying to have it both ways. France is trying to have it both ways. So this is where Sontonax and France is going to realize like the only non-counter revolutionaries, the only revolutionaries are really the coloreds, which makes sense because they're the people who want the change while maintaining the power, which is that's what most revolution is. It's people wanting change while keeping power or gaining power. At this point, we have a new character introduced here, Laveaux. who's going to be leading the armies. Mike Duncan spends a fair amount of time on him, and I think I will too. A real patriot, like he really believed in the revolution. He was anti-racist. By that I mean he liked supporting the coloreds. He allied with the coloreds. He took over the Northern Army, and he managed to actually drive out Biassou to the mountains. He managed to actually drive out Jean-Francois to Santo Domingo. He had legitimate success in pushing them back, not eliminating them, not killing them, not destroying the armies, but really pushing them back. And what he did that was so smart was he destroyed the garden plots and the lodgings. So they couldn't just come back because there's nothing to come back to. So much destruction. It's really sad. Similar things are happening in the West with Poverel's armies, but I'm not going to be doing that in a 200 level class. And the slave revolt was almost stopped. It was almost over. And then they had to go and cut Louis XVI's head off. Then they had to go ahead and have the terror. Then Europe just understood this was not going to work. This is not going to work having France like this. They started really attacking and ramping up their attacks. And we're having three kingdoms fighting for control. Spain, kingdoms of Spain and England are going to unite against France. And that's not just in France, but also in the colonies. Three major colonial powers. I left out the Dutch, okay? I'm sorry. I apologize. Anyone here is from Holland, I apologize. They were a colonial power as well, but this is what it looked like: British, Spanish, and French. And of course, that little bit of Haiti, that little bit of French was worth probably about as much as the rest of it, right? So these are the colonial powers in the Caribbean. We have the British, which I will have represented by the Union Jack, which of course is a colonial flag. We have the flag of Spain. That was actually the flag of Spain at this time, even though it was still very much a monarchy. And the flag of France, which looked like this. This was the three-color flag that replaced the Bourbon flag, the flag of Louis XVI and 15th and 14th, etc. So these are the three powers. And we're going to see, you won't even believe this. You won't even believe this. The three groups that I've been talking about this whole time, they're all going to go to different powers. They're all going to look for different backing. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable that these things keep on repeating, this division, this fight over this land, over this space, over this power, over this wealth, over this misery. It's going to keep breaking into these threes. Spain. Spain, right there in Santo Domingo, right across, right where Jean-Francois was chased. He was chased into Santo Domingo alongside his second in charge, Toussaint Louverture. And Spain says, listen, France is not going to win this war. You think, who they got that little guy there, Napoleon? I'm not quite gonna say, but oh, what are you gonna do? What, France is gonna take over all of Europe? Oh, no, they're going to install their government in Spain. Yeah, yeah. Okay. There's no way France is going to win this. So listen, you hook up with us. You just help us here on the island. All right. When we defeat France, you get to keep the freedom that you won. They didn't say, we'll give you the freedom. They were smart enough to say, we can't give you something that you already earned. So you see, they're not even trying to enslave them. You know, was Spain abolitionist? No. There was slavery all over the Spanish Empire in Latin America. They're not doing this because they're nice. They're not helping them out because they're nice. They're helping out the former slaves for the same reason that France helped out America in the American Revolution. It's in their imperial self-interest to weaken the other parties. Okay, so just no good guys, no bad guys in this class. So, Biassou, Jean-Francois, Toussaint, and let's just say, let's bring back Black Y. Let's say that he had a small force. Let's say he's going to join on the Spanish side as well. which makes sense because France isn't offering them anything. England already had seen a lot of Britain had already seen a lot of the big whites escape to Jamaica to flee because their plantations were destroyed. They were doing quite well in the slave trade as well, especially in Jamaica. So they make a promise to the white settlers. Okay, you help us invade Saint-Domingue, because again, many of the French were already in Jamaica. And when we win, because France isn't going to win, France can't possibly win this war. France can't beat England. Have you seen England? We've got a channel and boats. England will reinstate slavery and you'll get all your stuff back. So that makes sense for the whites, doesn't it? So they're on board with England, which leaves us with France, which has the coloreds, which has Sotonax, okay, which has Laveaux. Their first target is to eliminate the whites in Port-au-Prince, and they're fairly successful. By May 1793, the white uprising was mostly controlled. This is without British intervention. Okay. The May 5th, 1793 decree, Sotonax tries to fix things. He tries to say, we'll get slavery back, but the Code Noir, the thing that no one paid attention to except when it was useful for them, it's going to be like a real thing. Like masters have to provide, they have to give the food, they have to care for them, they cannot abuse them too much. Like they're really trying to say, like, slavery is fine actually if the slave masters are nice. And the thing that he did that made everybody mad was he read it in Creole. He had it read on every single plantation across the entire island so that every single enslaved person heard the words, you must be cared for. Your masters owe you respect and care and cannot abuse you too much. And if they do something wrong, you come talk to me and I will put the weight of the French army against your master. Interesting idea. But then a new colonial governor arrives, Galbaud, 1793. Hey guys, what's up? And he is going to be the thing that gets the revolution unstuck. The stalling is going to be done. Oh, come back to Monday's class. It's going to be a cap burner. It's going to be a wild, wild class. No, I didn't talk about Platon. I don't have time for that. All right. So there's where we are. I apologize for my video being so laggy. I'm half afraid that this didn't even record, but hopefully it did. So yeah, so the revolution's going to get re-kicked up. Toussaint's going to take a lot more of a position. We're going to see how the Civil War has weakened everything, the numbers and forces in France and monarchies and all these colonies. Like what's going to happen next with the empires and the people. It's an important story. All right, till next time. There's the camera.